Hello, welcome to Budapest and round 5 of the FIA GT Championship. The Hungarians are about to experience the world's top sports cars racing wheel to wheel. And it's always an awesome sight, whatever the result, but this year so far, it's been all Mercedes. This is one sport where silver is for the winners. The familiar Mercedes colour can usually be seen near the front. 4 wins in 4 races so far for the CLKs. Surprise success of the season has been the single car Paynos team. Aussie David Brabham and Eric Bernard several times outperforming the big budget Porsches. But don't count out the German giants just yet, or Scotsman Alan McNish. In his 911 GT1 he finished second last time out at Dijon, and he'll be aiming to go a step higher here in Hungary. Alan, this is important for you now.
Yes, it's very important. We've proved we have the speed, and now we've got to prove that we've got the performance to win a race. And I think this race could be the turning point for the championship.
Back here in Hungary, no surprises on the front row. It's a Mercedes 1-2. Let's find out how they got there from Simon Taylor.
Well, qualifying here yesterday would have done credit to a Formula One session. In the closing minutes, this was the very talented Alan McNish on a superbly smooth, committed lap in the new GT1 Porsche. Schneider's 1:29.86 to beat as Alan comes through the final right-hander. The seconds are ticking away. Is it going to be a Porsche on pole? He crosses the line, the watch stops at 1:29.451, and that puts McNish on pole position. But not for long. Here's Ricardo Zonta's final effort in the number 2 Mercedes, which was another 2/5 quicker. And finally, as the checkered flag came out, the reigning champion Bernd Schneider restored law and order and dipped under 1:29 to get the pole position back, to the absolute delight of Mercedes racing boss Norbert Haug and the rest of the team. That's 5 pole positions for Mercedes in 5 rounds, the 2 silver CLKs on the front row, but for Bernd Schneider, it's all in a day's work. Alan McNish was, as always, still cheerful.
Hey, by the way, you want to look at all the girls around here, not me. Not me. I'm not very handsome. The girls, like, look at this. Smile. Yay!
But as we prepare for this afternoon's race, Alan has his mind on beating Mercedes.
This morning in the warm-up we were quickest, and so I think that bodes for a good race. The only unfortunate thing is we're behind them at the start, so we're going to have to try and pull one out the bag here.
4th on the grid is the other GT1 Porsche of Jörg Müller, and 5th, David Brabham in the Paynos, which is having quite a season.
Yeah, it's been quite a good year really for us. Difficult to beat the 2 works teams, but we've been giving them a hard time. We've had 2 podium finishes in 3rd place, so we're quite pleased, and things are progressing well.
Things aren't quite so rosy in the GTC McLaren camp. Jeff Lees has qualified 10th, but he reckons his car doesn't like the tight, twisty nature of the Hungaroring. And here is that tight, dusty little track, and it's very hot here today. 3 hard hours ahead of the 28 starters. Is this going to be the day on this tight track that the Mercedes finally gets beaten by the Porsche? Marcos, incidentally, the leading GT2 qualifier. They're coming up to the rolling start. The lights are green. 2 Mercedes at the front, 2 Porsches behind them. They come storming down to the first corner, and it's Schneider who's got the lead. Schneider from Zonta, from McNish, and there's a Mercedes spinning in the middle. It's Bernd Mailander who's spun right in the middle of the first corner. One of the 911s has hit him. Somebody else was involved as well. The rest of the field streaming out down the hill behind us, but there is wreckage on this first corner down here below my position. That's one of the GT1 Porsches which has been damaged. A lot of its front bodywork is falling off. The Mercedes is still stationary in front of me. There is the 911, which is the car of Alfred Hager, and his race, I would think, is run, and yes, there's a red flag. They're going to red flag the race, so that means that we have to go through the whole starting procedure again, all the fields coming round to take up their positions on the grid once more. But that was Bernd Mailander in the blue V12 Mercedes who spun, coming all the way down the inside. We're going to see it again. He gets into the pit lane exit. The car starts to get away from him. He swings one way, then the other, locks up the brakes, clouts the back of one of the Zach Speed Porsches, and then spins across as the Vipers manage to avoid him. The GT1 Porsche clips him, and so does that 911, which actually hits him amidships. Now, the McLaren was also involved. I think the McLaren was hit at the back. Let's hear from Jeff Lees.
Nothing to do with me. The Mercedes just locked its brakes and slid straight into the back. Spun me round.
Yes, we're seeing exactly that. Look at Mailander on the outside. As he brakes, he clouts the McLaren, also clouts one of the green Zack-Speed Porsches. Most of the other GT2 cars manage to avoid him, but as the wreckage flies in the air, look at that white and green Porsche, bang! Hits him amidships. A lot of damage to those two cars. I'm sure we're not going to be seeing them take the restart. The crowd waiting for the wreckage to be cleared. The grid are now reassembled, and they go off on another rolling start lap. The grid order just the same as it was before. Schneider and Zonta in the two silver Mercedes at the front. Then McNish and Muller in the two white Porsches. Then the silver Paynos. They're on the final start-finish straight now. The lights are green. The race is on. Once more, the two Mercedes move as one. It's Schneider who's just easing away from Zonta. McNish is right there in third place. Muller is fourth. The Paynos is fifth. Then the two green Porsches split by the remaining blue Person Mercedes, the big V12 one which is still there. They go round behind the pits, down the hill through that tight left-hander, second gear left-hander, accelerating away from us across the valley, and Mercedes, Porsche and Paynos, and then two more Porsches and another Mercedes, and Bernd Schneider is already making a break. Bernd Schneider has the lead. Ricardo Zonta in second place. Those are the two silver Mercedes. Alan McNish, the young Scot, is in third place in the first of the two Works GT1 Porsches. Jörg Muller in fourth place in the other one. And in GT2, the race within a race that we have in all of these FIA GT rounds, it's a Marcos in the lead. The one Marcos in the race, driven by the Dutchman Cor Oyser, is leading the two Vipers, Pedro Lamy and Carl Wendlinger, second and third in GT2. But Cor Oyser's Marcos leads GT2. Mercedes lead GT1 as they come round to complete their first lap. It's the silver car with the yellow mirrors that's the number one car. That is Bernd Schneider. The car with the red mirrors, the number two car, is Ricardo Zonta. And already you can see what Mercedes' strategy is. Schneider makes the break. Schneider is pulling away, his car nodding under braking as he goes in the steep downhill long turn one. And the number two car, Ricardo Zonta, his job is to keep all the opposition behind, try and slow up Alan McNish. Well, Alan McNish is so close to the number two Mercedes, he's almost underneath its rear wing, but he won't be happy that Schneider is getting away. The computer tells me that at the end of that first lap, 1.2 seconds, the caption confirms it, 1.2 seconds the gap between the two Mercedes, and Alan McNish actually 1.8 seconds, all but a fraction away from the leader. McNish in third place. The Paynos is fifth. Then the two Zack-Speed GT1 Porsches of Bartels and Sandy Grau, and the sole surviving V12 Mercedes in 8th place, because of course the teammate to that car, the other blue Mercedes, was taken out in the accident which stopped the first part of the race. Schneider looking very smooth. Left-hand drive car, of course, leaning across the cockpit when he takes a right-hander. There, the second-placed car doing its job of keeping the number 7 Porsche behind. They cock up over the curbs. These dramatic-looking cars, which are meant to be road cars in theory. If you build a GT1 car to keep the FIA satisfied, you have to build one example of a road-going version. There is one road-going GT1 1998 Porsche. There is one road-going V8 Mercedes CLK. It's not a car you'd like to go shopping in, but there's the Marcos. Leading GT2, the Dutch entered Marcos, Cor Oyser at the wheel, and it's ahead of the two mighty Dams entered V10 8-litre Chrysler Vipers, which are getting very close indeed. Pedro Lamy, the little Portuguese ex-Formula 1 driver, in second place in that class. The two identical white and blue Vipers breathing down the Marcos' neck. It's Carl Wendlinger, another ex-Formula 1 driver, in the third-placed car. The Marcos, a 5-litre V8 pushrod car, and then a big truck-based V10 of 8 litres in the Chryslers. A V8, but a rather more sophisticated one in the CLK Mercedes running in GT1. And so rapid has been Bernd Schneider's pace that he's already up with the little 911 GT2 cars, and the traffic could play a part here. Alan McNish there in number 7 in third place in the GT1 Porsche. still being followed by his teammate Jörg Muller and by David Brabham in the Pénaz, but we've got Schneider working his way through these little GT1 Porsches now, and that's always a factor in FIA racing. The speed differential between the fastest of the GT1 cars and the slowest of the GT2s is very considerable. You can see it now with the Zonta Mercedes and the Alan McNish Porsche working their way through this little traffic jam of 911 Porsches. They look very slow, they've still got a maximum speed of knocking on 170 miles an hour, but they do provide traffic, particularly if they're having their own little battle, which those two are now, and Jörg Muller has been badly delayed, Jörg Muller being slowed by those 911s briefly. And the Marcos is in the pit lane. We've been sent a message to say that Marcos has got a 10-second stop-go penalty, and what it says here is that it's for a minor procedural infringement on the grid. Goodness knows what that is, but sadly, Korois is in the pits, and there are the two Chryslers running nose to tail, 1 and 2 now in GT2, as Korois serves his 10 seconds, and he's going to rejoin. Well, he's having trouble getting started, I think. Now, there he goes. That looked like a little bit more than 10 seconds to me, but Korois back into the race in that mighty multicoloured Marcos, but the Chryslers have, as a result, gone back to their normal 1 and 2 at the front of GT2 as we ride in GT1 in Jörg Muller's Porsche, coming onto the start-finish straight in 4th place. We can see Alan McNish ahead. In the pits now, the GT1 Porsche of Gooselaar. That looks like a retirement. It was damaged in the first accident, that car. Oh, and off into the gravel. That is Ernst Paumberger. Now we've got Jörg Muller, the car we're riding with, on the tail of the leading Viper. Pedro Lamy is lapped by Jörg Muller in the Porsche he's sharing with Bob Wallach. He's still in 4th place, coming up behind one of the 911s. A yellow flag waving there. That was for the white Porsche that's in the gravel, and he had to wait until he'd passed the yellow flag, did Jörg Muller, before he overtook and lapped the slower 911 GT2. Those are the regulations. In the pits now, one of the Zakspeed Porsches. A little bit of damage at the front on that car, and this is a routine stop. We're into the routine stops now. Michael Bartel's out of the car, Armin Hahne taking it over, Jeff Lees coming in the McLaren, and Thomas Bashir, the owner, the German amateur sportsman, owner of that car, will no doubt be taking over from the very experienced Englishman Jeff Lees. McLaren's played such a major role in FIA GT racing last year, but this is the only McLaren doing this championship consistently in 1998. Bernd Schneider, the leader, on the tail of Marcel Thiemann in one of last year's V12 Mercedes, and Thiemann always going to be slower than Schneider, but I think that Thiemann's car is in a bit of trouble. Certainly Schneider goes on his way, followed by Thiemann. Schneider in the newer lightweight V8 car, and Thiemann in the older, heavier V12 car. Once more we ride with Muller. Once more Muller has one of the ever-present 911 GT2 cars to lap. He does so, and I think that Marcel Thiemann has stopped out on the circuit. There he is. The blue V12 Mercedes has now stopped, and he's moving it to a safer place, but obviously his race is run. Alan McNish on the tail of Armin Hahne, whom he's lapping. In fact, Armin Hahne holding him up badly. Hahne has just taken over that green Zakspeed GT1 Porsche. Alan McNish hasn't come in yet, but McNish, badly held up there again. Armin Hahne just moved across in front of him in a disgraceful fashion. Both of those cars effectively works cars. The green cars are run by Zakspeed, but McNish is clearly so much quicker than Hahne. Now we've got Schneider in the pits. Schneider worms his way out of the cockpit of the number 1 Mercedes, worming into the cockpit now. His equally tall co-driver, the Australian Mark Webber. Webber gets himself into that tight little cockpit, and out of the pits now comes the Porsche of Jörg Muller, driven now by Bob Wallach, as in comes Alan McNish, and Alan McNish stops, and Yannick Dalmas is ready. Dalmas helps Alan McNish out of his cockpit. McNish takes his seat with him because Yannick Dalmas is taller and sits on the seat that's underneath McNish's seat. Meanwhile, Mark Webber gets the leading car back into the race, his pit stop safely completed, and the Pénaz is coming in too.
We are thinking, because he just said that the tires look okay,
There's David Brabham waiting to take over from Frenchman Eric Bernard. Bernard coming headlights on down the pit lane in that mighty front-engined Paynos. Gets the car stopped, opens the cockpit. It must be very, very hot indeed in there. Out gets Eric Bernard. David Brabham clambers aboard as they refuel the car, and if they're going to change tyres, they have to do it when the refueling is finished. They're not allowed to refuel and change tyres at the same time. There's Dalmas in third place. Let's hear from McNish.
It looks like it must be really hard work out there today.
It's very, very hot in the car, there's no question. The outside temperature is very hot, but inside the car, the work rate is high as well as the temperature.
Yes, there's even the usually cool Schneider feeling the heat in the Mercedes pit. And one of the Vipers in trouble. That's the Carl Wendlinger Mark Dues Viper, apparently being retired, and the McLaren being wheeled away. Jeff Lees and Thomas Becheur out of the race. Meanwhile, Klaus Ludwig at the wheel of the second place Mercedes. Mark Webber at the wheel of the leading Mercedes. Yannick Dalmus leading the Porsche pursuit in the Alan McNish car. Can the Porsches take the fight to the Mercedes? There's still a long way to go.
Welcome back. We've had our first round of pit stops and Mercedes are still out in front, but there's plenty of time for things to change. Let's rejoin Simon.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, Mark Webber still leading in the Schneider car. Klaus Ludwig, there he is, still second in the Zonta car. And the two Works Porsches are still there in third and fourth places, with the Alan McNish and Yannick Dalmas car third. That's Thomas Becheur in the pits. His McLaren has retired. Let's hear from its driver, Jeff Lees.
The car's usually very reliable. It seems like it's blown its water out for some reason. Either a hose has got a hold or head gasket or something's gone.
Well, as expected, the heat and the nature of this twisty Hungarian track are taking their toll. That's the gap on the caption between the second place Mercedes and the third place Porsche. It's over half a minute now between Klaus Ludwig there in the car number 2, the one with the red mirrors, and Yannick Dalmas, who's driving Alan McNish's Porsche at the moment. Alan McNish in the pit, still waiting to take over for the final stint. But these Mercedes looking very fast, very smooth and reliable. And Ludwig in the pit lane. Ludwig coming in for what I assume will be his second routine stop. They're going to put young Ricardo Zonta back in the car as we ride once more in the second Works GT1 Porsche. Bob Wallach, the veteran French long-distance driver, at the wheel of that car now, the car that Jörg Müller started. And there's a lot of gravel on the circuit there. I think that little GT2 Porsche's just had a spin, put a lot of gravel on the road right in front of Bob Wallach, who had to dodge round both the gravel and the slowly restarting GT2 Porsche as well. But Bob Wallach knows that that's what long-distance sports car racing is all about, and Alan McNish is ready as Yannick Dalmas comes in. In goes the seat for the little Scotsman once more, followed by the little Scotsman himself. Yannick Dalmas helps him on board, and Mark Webber is doing a great job in the lead in the Schneider Mercedes, himself working his way past that same little GT2 Porsche. But Mark Webber must soon be coming to the end of his stint as well, and Bernd Schneider is ready, waiting for him. In comes Bob Wallach, so Wallach brings in the number 8 Porsche, and Jörg Müller will take that car over. They're cleaning the screen, out gets Wallach, and Müller ready to clamber aboard. And that is Mark Webber. Mark Webber out of the number 1 Mercedes. They're changing the wheels. They've already got it refueled. And they've already got Bernd Schneider on board. Schneider waiting impatiently so that they can finish the tyres, they can get the car started off, and he can get back into the race and get his lead back. A lot of activity in the pits at the moment because most people are doing this 3-hour race in 3 stints. The car started, away goes Bernd Schneider, puts a bit of rubber down on the pit lane and goes rocketing back onto the downhill entry to the first downhill corner at the Hungaroring. And meanwhile, we've got the Paynos in now. The Paynos being refueled. David Brabham already out of the car. There's Eric Bernard being strapped in, and they're refueling the car now. And there's a fuel spill. There's some fuel spilt on the back of that car, and it's on fire. It's on fire, and David Brabham's pushed back, and Eric Bernard's out of the car. They've got the fire extinguishers on it very quickly. All the mechanics have stood back. And Eric Bernard, I think, he's got some burns on his face. He's certainly uncomfortable, but they've got that far out, and it hasn't got to the fuel tank, the refueling tank behind. I think they've got it under control, but that was a very, very nasty moment indeed. Yes, the fire is now well and truly out. Eric Bernard was inside the car when it caught fire. What happened? We're going to see it again. There was fuel spilt all over the roof and the side of the car, and when it went on fire, Eric Bernard leapt from the car, rolled out of the car, but there were flames inside, and that's why his face was burned. I don't think it's too serious. Fortunately, he will have been wearing his flameproof mask under his helmet. There he is.
Just a little, yeah, on the left side of the face.
I was putting Eric in the car, and all of a sudden I felt a splash on the helmet and looked up, and I could see the fuel running down like this. And I was in two minds. Do I try and get Eric out? Do I go? And when I was thinking, no, it just went up. And I quickly turned around, and I had a cable wrapped around my leg. So I was trying to get out of that, but it's unfortunate, really, because I think, we could have got a couple of points here this weekend.
Well, a great relief to see that both Eric Bernard and David Brabham, and indeed all the Paynos team and everybody else down there in the pits, completely unhurt. But that was a very, very nasty moment. Here is Bernd Schneider extending a comfortable lead. The Mercedes 1 and 2, the Porsches 3 and 4. Alan McNish still doing a grand job in third place, but the GT1 Porsche, even on this tight, narrow, twisty circuit, just doesn't seem to have quite the steam to be able to cope with these very quick V8 Mercedes. Headlights on, that's the green Zaxby Porsche of Bartels and Harmer, which has taken over the 5th place vacated by the unfortunate Paynos. Red mirrors on the number 2 Mercedes, that's the Ludwig Zonta car with Ricardo Zonta, the young Brazilian, at the wheel at the moment. Zonta, a man who's got his eyes set on Formula One soon, and there the 49-year-old veteran Klaus Ludwig, Zonta's co-driver, watching from the pits as Zonta is doing an excellent job of maintaining this 1-2 for Mercedes at the moment. In fact, he's actually closing the gap a little bit on Bernd Schneider. Schneider picking his way through the back markers, and the gap between the two Mercedes less than 18 seconds now. There it is, in fact, 17.9 seconds between Schneider and Zonta. And although we're in the closing stages of this race, it's certainly not over yet. Remember, in the last round at Dijon, the leading Mercedes had a suspension failure pretty late in the race, and Schneider has done this game for long enough to know that it's late in the race that the mistakes can come, that the concentration can lapse. It's now that you have to work your way through the back markers with particular care. The track is slippery, the drivers are tired. That's Klaus Ludwig watching anxiously in the pits as Ricardo Zonta holds the 2nd place. And there the gap between leader Schneider and third man McNish, 56.7 seconds now, a long way, and McNish knows that there's nothing he can do about these V8 Mercedes CLKs. All he can do is keep his Porsche on the straight and narrow and go for a podium. Schneider starts his penultimate lap now, the Mercedes nodding as the brakes go on as he comes down into that long, long right-hander that takes him onto the left-hander behind the pits on the Hungaroring, the same circuit used in the Hungarian Grand Prix by the Formula One drivers. They find it pretty tight and dusty, and so have these GT1 cars. The GT2s always there to be lapped, and Schneider picks his way between a couple of them now. In that GT2 class, incidentally, the Chryslers are no longer leading. It's actually Sascha Massa and Bruno Eichmann in their 911 GT2 Porsche, and they're running in a remarkable 6th overall. They're ahead of the Pedro Lamy Beretta Chrysler Viper, which is in 2nd place, and that multicoloured Marcos, to the delight of the few British enthusiasts who've made the trip out to Hungary to watch this race, the Marcos is still there in 3rd place in GT2. Now you can see in the front air intake of that leading Mercedes. It looks a bit green in that bottom air intake, and as I look at the computer readout of the recent lap times from Bernd Schneider, he had a slow lap a couple of laps ago, and I'm told that his car was seen slithering across the grass, so the normally metronomically smooth Bernd Schneider has in fact had a moment off the track right in these closing stages of this race. He's coming up now to start his final lap, so that off doesn't seem to have done him any damage at all, but that is an indication of just how tough and grueling and exhausting this race has been. The cockpit temperatures, we know, are tremendously high. It gets very, very hot inside these GT1 coupes, particularly of course in the front engine one, the Paynos, which we lost to a fire earlier on in the race. But Bernd Schneider knows he's made one mistake. He's on this final lap. He's still got some GT2 cars to pick his way past, which he does now, passes one of them as he goes up the hill to the sweeps at the other side of the valley. And only half a lap now stand between Bernd Schneider and the checkered flag, and this is going to be his third win, Mark Webber's third win of the season, and it's going to be Mercedes' fifth win out of 5 rounds in the FIA GT Championship. Their domination of the series this year has been absolutely total with this new lightweight V8 car. They took it to Le Mans, incidentally. It wasn't reliable, and that was the one piece of glory that Porsche have been able to have this year in the famous French 24-hour race. But in the FIA GT Championship rounds, Porsche have been completely conquered by Mercedes, and it's ironic that Bernd Schneider is now lapping the Bartels-Hahner Zakspeed Porsche for what must be the 5th time in this race. He's just got the final left-hander behind the pits, and then the last long right-hander, which will bring him onto the start-finish straight. As it does so now, the Mercedes-Benz crew are waiting to cheer him home in the pits, as is Mark Webber, and Bernd Schneider wins for Mercedes-Benz in Hungary.
Mark, well done. Third win of the season for you now.
Yeah, it was a great race for us. Obviously, Bernd did a good job at the start and the beginning, and I got a nice little buffer for him in the middle, so it's 1-2 for the team. It's fantastic.
Another all-conquering display by Mercedes. 5 races and 5 wins this season. In the past couple, Porsche have edged slightly closer, but they've never yet mounted a convincing challenge. There has been a change in GT2, so the Vipers run is broken. Beaten for the first time by Sascha Masson and Bruno Eichmann in the Porsche, the British-built Marcos finished a creditable 3rd. There's still nothing to ruffle the composure of the Mercedes team. Schneider and Webber certainly look relaxed. Fastest lap of the day fell to Ricardo Zonta in 2nd place, and yet again 3rd for Yannick Dalmas and Alan McNish.
Alan, well done. Podium again for you. Yeah, we managed to pick up a 3rd position. Not exactly where we would like, but after the first stint it was pretty obvious that we weren't in a position really to catch the Mercedes the way that they took off in the 2nd stint. They decided to change all the tyres this time, and we went for a double stint, which I think was the best thing for us. However, they planned, with their setup, they planned their thing a little bit better.
How much progress are you making, do you think, in catching them?
Oh, we're making a lot of progress every time. We're coming out with new bits and pieces. Michelin are coming out with a new tyre. However, all the time we're progressing, so are they. And so it's not as if the ball sits still and it always keeps on moving, but you know, that's part of motor racing, and that's why we're in it. We're in it to win. Today we didn't quite do it, but we're getting closer.
So we're halfway through the season now, and the 4 Mercedes drivers have a 23-point lead over their rivals, who must be wondering how on earth they can get on terms.